Everybody, we're going to call the meeting of the school board to order. It's 7 p.m. on Tuesday, October 26th. Item 1 is going to be adoption of the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any board discussion on this agenda item? Seeing none, any public comment on this agenda item? Seeing none, any remote?
No, Mr. Cassiopo.
Thank you, board. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Item 2, flag salute. If you can join Laurel, would you lead us?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And just for the public's information, we had a request last board meeting that some of the folks couldn't really understand us that well up here. So if any of the board members wish to remove their mask while they're speaking, they can. But I just want to remind everybody that we are under mandate. I know we all have different opinions of it, but as a board, we're under mandate. So I'd ask that when you're done speaking, you put your mask back on. So we'll move on to item 3, superintendent's report.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the community, members of the board. Welcome tonight. At our last meeting, there were a number of items that were raised that I wanted to report on tonight. The first one was a report about some of the fights that have happened at Carson High School. And I spoke with Mr. Chambers, who's the principal there. And so the information that I have was printed on the 18th of October, so this is about a week out. But at the time, he reported that 14 fights had occurred at Carson High School. And amidst these fights, there were several that were considered as assault and battery. And those individuals were arrested, cited, and are facing long-term suspensions or limited expulsions. We really are taking the strongest possible consequences with students who especially have demonstrated really an antisocial behavior while at school. I'd also like to kind of break down some of the participants in these activities. 9 of the students who have been involved in the 14 fights mentioned were 9th graders, 10 were 10th graders, 11th graders, there were 7 of those students and only 2 that were seniors. And I think that's important because when you think about the students who have not been in school, not only have they not been in school, but when the pandemic came on, really everything stopped. Think about all of the student activities that are part of our community, from Little League to Scouts, to Sunday school. All of these things stopped. And as we brought school back into the buildings, and as we've had the largest gathering of youth in several years, a lot of our students have not been in high school yet. They may have experienced high school last year when there was a hybrid model being used. And so now as we've brought 2,300 kids back together, there's really a need for greater opportunities for our kids to learn how to get along with each other, to go through the various activities that are in town that helps all of us really to get along and to learn. But I did want to report on that. I saw an item in the news where a school in Louisiana had 40 dads come forward and offered to use their time and presence to help in the schools, and it's made a big difference. I certainly would make that same invitation here for community members who have the time and the interest to spend some time in the schools, and we certainly will take them up if they have that interest. There was also a request that I received during the week with regard to face masks. And I just wanted to reiterate our district's stance on face masks. As you know, the governor has made a mandate that all adults who are in our schools and on our school buses wear face masks. And so that certainly applies to all of our staff members. It also applies to visitors to the schools, anybody who might be there for any type of school business. We ask that they wear masks. For our students, as you recall, we started the school year with an optional condition. And in the first 3 weeks, we were excluding a large number of students because of close contacts and the high number of new cases of COVID. And when the face masks for students were implemented, we went immediately in about 2 weeks' time down to 7 students that were excluded for being close contacts. Now, we're still seeing about the same number of new cases in the schools. However, we had made a statement at the time that students that were wearing face masks, we would go back to that optional condition once we left that high transmission category to the low transmission category. And this information is available under nvhealthresponse.nv.gov. And just to explain a little bit about what's happening, if you look at the map that's provided by the health department, you'll see Carson City right in the middle of course, Washoe County, Story County, Lyon County, and also Douglas County. And our county is really the only one that is starting to see a decline in the number of new cases. And I'm not saying that this is just at school, this is in our community as a whole. So if we're right in the middle around counties that are having high transmission rates still, it's likely that those additional numbers of new cases are still going to find their way into Carson City. However, in the schools, the masks have made a significant difference, and we are not seeing the numbers that we saw in the first 3 weeks of school. And however, we are going in a good direction. The numbers in the county are going down. So we're hopeful that in the short time that we have before the holiday seasons, that we'll see these numbers continue to be reduced, and then we can go from there. I'd also like to let the trustees know, and also the members of our community, that I'll be starting a committee that is recognized in our collective bargaining units for collective bargaining agreement for our employees. That's a joint advisory committee. And the members of the leadership for our different employee groups are helping me to populate that committee. And our first meeting is scheduled for the 18th of November. And that's an opportunity for our staff to come together, share ideas about working conditions, and hopefully help in any way that will allow school resources to provide additional care and guidance. And then my last item is just something for your calendars. November 17th is our next community PLC, be starting at 6 p.m. and that will again be a virtual meeting as we continue to modify our existing strategic plan towards a refresh that's due to happen next school year. So with that, Mr. President, that's my report.
Okay, turned it off. Thank you, Richard. Item 4, board reports for information only. Let's start off with Carson High School.
Hi there. So at Carson High, we have started a few new things that
I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you. Like everybody else, we just need you to state your name before you
Gotcha.
present. Thank you.
So I'm Sarah Wiggins. Sorry about that.
Okay.
So at Carson High School, we've started to do a few new things differently. So to start off, we normally do school beautification for the school, where leadership tries to get as many clubs and communities involved just to try to clean up trash.
But now we've started doing that where we try to involve each club and do an activity each week to try to make the school a better place. So with that, we have contacted all the clubs at Carson High School. This week, leadership is starting off, and we're just starting off simple by just working in the cafeteria after school and just cleaning up trash, since that has been a big issue recently. And I believe next week is going to be HOSA doing that. Continuing on, we have academic letter, November 3rd, from 7 to 8. And with that, we are just having kids stop by, pick up their certificate, have a little treat, and then head on out. Finally, we have also done more door decorating contests around the school. So with that, we just asked teachers to try to decorate their door around the holidays that are coming up, which right now is going to be Halloween. And voting for that is up on your class Google Classroom, and that'll be ending tomorrow. And finally, moving on to some sports. The boys football team is actually playing their playoff game at Minogue, I believe Thursday at 7. Senior volleyball night for the girls is tomorrow night in the big gym, I believe at 7 as well, along with a boys soccer game also tomorrow night. And then just to wrap things up, I'm on the golf team, and I just want to say that we made it to state this last week and competed. So thank you.
Sarah, you're not tell them the whole story of state golf. Yeah, tell them the whole story. Yes. You should be very proud. You should.
Thank you. Should I talk about regionals too for a minute? Okay. So I'll just go all the way back to about 3 weeks ago. We had our regional competition up at Sierra Sage in, I don't remember where that is, but it's super up north a little bit. And the way tournaments work is it's 2 days of tournaments and it's your overall score combined. So with that, my first day at Sierra Sage, I shot a 78 and then an 83, and I overall got 4th place at that tournament for regionals. And then as a team, we got 3rd place and made it down to state as a team. We competed down there, and I had a little bit of a rough time, but it was fun. We all enjoyed the trip, and we're just glad to be down there. Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have anybody from Pioneer? Seeing no one. How about Nevada Association of School Boards update?
Sure, I will update you on that. For your information, you guys probably have already seen the registration for our conference that's occurring November 11th and 12th. And also, we had some good news because they've announced the award winners for this year. And so Joe and I were able to meet Bridget Gordon, our Carson High School counselor, and she was recognized as the school district employee making a difference. So we surprised her, took some pictures, got some stuff at her work that way. And tonight, I'd like to recognize a couple extra of our winners. So Director of the Year is Mike Walker from Carson City. And Individual School Board Member of the Year is Joe Cassiopo. So thank you. And I don't have flowers because I don't know if you guys would like them. But anyway, I got you some chocolates, so I'll deliver those.
I was hoping for a bouquet. It'd be my first one ever.
Congratulations. That was great representation for Carson City School District. And all of the award winners across the state will be recognized at our awards banquet that Saturday night of the conference.
Thanks, Laurel. I now should have run longer and faster before the meeting this evening. So let's see. Board announcements. Let's start with Mike.
So thank you, Laurel. Congratulations, Joe. So as the director for Carson City, I want to thank Laurel especially. We were in cahoots to surprise Joe and Bridget at one time, and then unfortunately I became ill, and so Laurel at the last minute scrambled and got it together. So thank you to Laurel and Joe for filling in, and Mr. Stokes and Mr. Chambers for also representing us. And then Behind the scenes was Ananda Campbell, kind of being stealthy and getting a meeting together. So I appreciate the hard work of everyone and recognizing Bridget.
Just a quick shout out, Mike, to Ananda Campbell. She has the most amazing like confetti streamers that she got that are not little pieces of confetti. They're just really cool streamers. So that was super exciting.
Yeah, so thank you both for doing that. That's awesome. And I want to say congratulations to Sarah. She's been with us 2 years, and because of COVID, we don't get to know her quite as much as some of the last student representatives. So we're proud of you for your work in Vegas, and we're glad to work with you this year. So a couple things from Mark Twain. Their Socktober celebration was successful. They got 2,000 pairs of socks, and they are donating those to the VA home. And they're currently participating in the fish can food drive, and so they are encouraging all families to send non-perishable food items in with their child to school. And that will conclude my report.
Thank you. Stacy?
I would just like to personally thank my Board of Trustees members, administration, staff, and the community for the outpour support in this last couple weeks. We do appreciate it, and it's made it a little easier to get through. So I do appreciate you guys being there for us.
Thank you, Stacy. Dawn?
From Dr. Lee Conley, principal of Eagle Valley Middle School. This Thursday, October 28th, during the school day, they are having a Halloween dance with activity rooms. And it's a reward for students who have shown positive behavior and have been working hard. Students are allowed to wear school appropriate costumes to school that day. And that's my report.
Thank you. Lupe?
So from Siliger, I met with Principal Zona, and she invited me to participate in a committee to revisit whether they do the standard student attire. So I'm excited to participate in that. She also informed me that their enrollment, their attendance is 96%, so that's super amazing. And just like Mr. Stokes said, the students are being educated on how to perform in the regular classroom settings. So we recognize that the teachers are doing more than teaching the academic components. And so I commend all the teachers for the extra work that they're doing to get the students back on track. Let's see, what else did I have for her? I think that was it from Siliger. I also attended the EL advisory team meeting that took place on the 13th of October. And basically, they're going to focus on finding ways to support the English learners. We were informed that we have about 953 students that are going in through, that are going through the English learners program, and so they're trying to find ways to help them stay motivated, and they consider doing some cultural activities to get them engaged and in participating in other extracurricular activities as well at school. They're also considering encouraging them to do the biliteracy seal for their diploma, which really helps them feel empowered about being bilingual. So exciting stuff. I believe that concludes my report.
Thank you. Laurel?
So for Fritch Elementary School, they'd like to, Mr. Brown would like to thank the families who are participating in conferences this week and remind them there's still opportunities to sign up if they haven't. And also, Fritch is trying to stuff the doghouse with food items for fish. So outside in front of Fritch, they have a doghouse, and non-perishable food items can be put in there, and they're trying to fill it up and do canned food drive for fish. At Fremont Elementary School, they are also looking forward to more parents at conferences this week. And tomorrow morning at 7:30 a.m. is a PTA meeting via Zoom, which is nice because that's a hard time to make it there. And I'm glad I asked Dr. Ward if it was 7:30 p.m. or a.m. So 7:30 a.m. And then lastly, I would just like to recognize as a public service announcement that this month is Breast Cancer Awareness Month, and 1 in 8 women in their lives in the U.S. will be diagnosed with breast cancer. This last year, it was my youngest sister who was diagnosed, and just like to encourage everyone not to let, I know it's been difficult scheduling appointments at times, but do your self-exams and schedule your appointments. Doctors are still seeing you. Don't put off those things. So that concludes my report.
Thank you. Rich?
Yes, Principal Sadler would like to report that the Carson Middle School CM News has created a digital student newspaper. All staff and students should have received a notification through Parent Square, and they encourage everybody to go on their website and view it. And Principal Sadler would also like to thank 7th grade CMS Middle School student Peter Crossman for his leadership and innovation in putting together the digital newspaper. So congratulations to him.
Yeah, he's mine. I didn't know he was planning this. He just did it all on his own, and I found out about it afterwards.
Yeah, that's great. And the 6th grade Glow in the Dark dance will take place on Wednesday, October 27th from 2:30 to 4 p.m. Students must have passing grades in all classes and no ones in citizenship. Cost to attend is $3, but the cost will be reduced if you bring canned food. The cost can be reduced. And they'd also like to give special thanks to the Carson School PTA for organizing an outstanding fall carnival on October 15th. CMS students and staff had so much fun playing games during encore class and lunch periods, and they're very thankful for the support of the PTA. And Ms. Raquetta from Boardwalk Bray would like to report that this week they're welcoming all parents into the school for parent-teacher conferences. They are also asking that the parents check the lost and found for items that the kids may have left behind. There's quite a few different items, water bottles, coats, sweaters, etc., that they've accumulated, and they would like the parents to check to see if it's one of their kids'. And this next week, November 1st through the 5th, they're having their book fair, and the kids can purchase books after school and before school. The school is also holding their Veterans Day ceremony November 10th at the flagpole at 8:45. They are inviting all veterans to join them for this special event. I've attended this for the last 4 or 5 years, and I tell you, it's a very nicely put on affair. And any veterans that are listening, I would encourage them to go and participate in this event. And I know Carson Middle School is also going to do something. Okay. And their PTO, Boardwalk Bray's PTO, is holding a cookie dough fundraiser from November 1st to November 15th. And the delivery of the cookie dough will be right before Christmas, so that'll help during the baking season. And they would also like to thank their PTO for all their support. And that concludes my report.
Thank you. Laurel, then Lupe.
Sure, I'll go ahead and update on the Carson Middle School Veterans Concert. It is November 10th at 10 a.m. at Carson Middle School, and Bree Valley does a great job with it. And usually, I'm guessing they'll do it again this year, where the 8th graders do a veteran spotlight, and they put it out in the front circle, and it's really nice placards about someone they know that served as a veteran. So you have the opportunity to come to the concert and view those.
Thanks. Lupe?
Thank you, Joe. I forgot to mention that I had the pleasure of going to a couple of classrooms with Mrs. Zona at her school, and I was able to observe how dedicated the students are. I was very, very impressed, and it was very inspiring to see them working together with their peers and with their teachers. It was just very impressive, and that just made me realize how important it is for us to go and visit the other schools. So I'm looking forward to doing so.
Good. Thank you very much. For me, not an official report, but I had a chance to visit Pioneer High School last week, I think it was. I had a nice conversation with the principal, chatted with a couple of teachers, saw some students. And Pioneer, it's not a comprehensive high school, but the amount of work and programs they have there, I think they do a really good job. Like every school, they have some kids that are high achievers. They have some that maybe school, for whatever reason, isn't the most important thing to them, but they have a way of connecting them with most all these kids. And I think they do a good job. And for the most part, I think all these students really appreciate the effort that the faculty at Pioneer puts in. So I just want to extend congratulations to the staff and students and parents at Pioneer. Real quick, we're going to do association reports and public comment, but as part of my report, last board meeting, sorry, I know when I turn my head, the mic can't hear. Last board meeting, we had, I believe, one speaker asked us a question about vaccines, and I just wanted to, I'm sure there'll be more questions about it, but just to make it clear, our school district isn't planning on mandating any vaccines. We all know where that could be, where this all could be going, but if that happens, my understanding is it's going to come from the state, not the school districts. We're not going to decide on our own, hey, we want to mandate vaccines. So I just wanted to make that clear to everybody that would be something from the state that gets tossed down to us. Number 5, association reports. Do we have any association reports, either in person or remote?
None remotely, Mr. Cassiopo.
Okay, seeing none, we're going to move on to public comment. And again, public comment, everybody has up to 3 minutes, and we just ask that you don't simply repeat the person in front of you. We do want to hear from everybody and what you have to say. We know we've got some reoccurring themes, and we do appreciate those, even though admittedly they're sometimes uncomfortable to hear, but we do appreciate it. And with that, why don't we get started? Again, I have a list of folks that signed our speaker list. And if you didn't sign it, that's okay. I'm still going to call for public comment. One thing we're going to ask is Renee put some speaker sign-in forms on the table, because sometimes when people are speaking, she doesn't get their name. And so whether you do it before, during, or after, if you could just sign your name and leave it on the table, we'll come and collect them afterwards. It won't impact your 3 minutes. We just wanted to get an accurate account of who's speaking. So with that, we're going to get started first with the list. And Lee Elliott, if you'd start us off, please.
I do miss the podium. Please be a little bit lenient with me tonight. Most of you know a gentleman that shows up here, almost every school board, gives you papers, facts, or whatever you want to believe they are. Mike Morrissey passed away last night in his sleep of pneumonia. Mike Morrissey was a patriot, whether you believed in what he had to say or not. He loves, and still does, have a great impact on the people of Carson City. Of all these people back here, of all the people that showed up for protests and rallies downtown, Mike Morrissey was my friend, and he will remain my friend until the good Lord decides to take me home. Mike fought hard. He loved his family and his friends to the point where he would go to your house if need be just to pick up something, like he did for me a few times. He was a great man, a patriot, and he will be missed. But his legacy is behind me and out on the street. And in that flag there's not much else can be said about Mike except that all of us will truly, truly miss picking up the phone and saying good morning. Mike had his facts in order. He knew what he was saying. He just didn't willy-nilly put out stats for everybody to read. And so when I close here in 22 seconds, I would ask that we just have a moment of silence to remember Mike, our friend and our colleague. Thank you.
Thank you, Lee. First of all, we will take a moment of silence, but Lee, I just want to say I'm sorry for your loss and his family's loss, and anybody who knew Mike, their loss. We've had too many losses in the last week or so. So if you wouldn't mind, just please extend my sincere condolences to his family and friends.
Thank you.
At this point, we would like to take just a moment of silence for Mike. Thank you, everybody. Okay, our next speaker is Barb Mathers.
I attended the town hall meeting last Thursday at Douglas High School concerning critical race theory in our schools, which we need to have to Superintendent Stokes. You should talk to Superintendent Keith Lewis about setting a meeting up for Carson. He actually set that meeting up. I realized after attending that meeting that critical race theory is all about semantics. As a school board, you can say CRT isn't in our schools because it isn't written somewhere in the state guidelines. However, that doesn't prevent individual teachers from shoving their personal or political agendas in our kids' faces with inappropriate signs outside of their classrooms, like this one, which I'll submit to the board, discussing sexual stereotypes and why they're bad, or having a gay flag or Black Lives Matter flag on display in their room, or not displaying an American flag, or asking the students how they identify on a daily basis and pushing pronouns in our kids. I have a list of 3 teachers that are doing so at Carson High, which I'll pass on to Richard Varner because he's the only school board member who will likely follow up on this. It's also about semantics because the board isn't actively doing anything to establish any policies to prevent CRT from being taught. Why can't you say we'll do all we can to keep it out of the classroom? The only way to actually ensure that our students are not being taught critical race theory is to establish policies that prevent it from being taught. That is what you need to do, not just say it's not in our schools. One of the reasons that town hall meeting was called was because a librarian at Carson Valley Middle School blew the whistle on a book that has been used by teachers in Douglas. It's called Culturally Responsive Teaching and the Brain, Promoting Authentic Engagement and the Rigor Among Culturally and Linguistically Diverse Students. Any guess what that book's about? I want to know if Carson High School teachers have that book or other kind of curriculum similar. If you want to check out his video that discusses all of the CRT curriculum and other classes that teachers are going to be required to take, like multicultural education and culturally responsive pedagogy, you can find it at rebrand.ly/CRTDCSD. Another important preventive measure that I learned about at the town hall meeting we need to push is cameras in the classroom. Nevada Family Alliance is leading a nationwide campaign calling for cameras in all K through 12 public school classrooms. Please look at the website camerasintheclassroom.org. Karen England states, "This is not only a call for transparency in what is being presented to our children, we believe it is a valuable tool for creating a safer learning environment. Cameras in the classroom will help restore the cooperative process between parents and educators and teaching our children." Prior to remote learning being forced on so many students to comply with COVID stay-at-home orders, Parents had little direct knowledge of the day-to-day happenings in their children's schools, but all that changed in 2020. Home computers became windows into the classroom. As parents watched over the shoulder of their kids, they noted that daily lessons often went beyond basic education and crossed the line into indoctrination. Parents need to wake up and take an active part in their children's school. My son attended Fremont in first and second grade. His first grade teacher allowed me to go into the school many times. I volunteered. Second grade, she never let me in the classroom. Parents need to know what's going on in the classroom.
Thank you. Hey, Barb, what was the end of that on the other side of that paper? Yeah. DCSD, okay. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, next we have Miles Humphreys.
All right, Miles Humphreys for the record. I just want to bring something up. Are you guys familiar with NRS 630.160? Raise your hand if any of you guys are a medical doctor, medical professional, or work under a practicing doctor with a valid license. Are you guys practicing under Sisolak's medical license? Oh, that's right, he doesn't have one. After speaking with the Board of Medical Examiners, they tend to agree with me. And also, you guys can check it out yourself at medboard.mv.gov. So, I do not consent to having my child in a mask. You guys can't have it both ways. So, there's been no form that the district has sent out in order to say that my kid has to wear a mask, and the parents agree to it. Now, what this board needs to realize is if they want to go ahead and push this and act like doctors and everything else and smother our kids, they better be willing to sign a liability that says that they take full responsibility for what might happen to the kids, whether it be physically, emotionally, spiritually, and everything else that goes along with it. So who's willing to sign a liability form because of how you guys are mandating or following the mandate that is totally unpractical? Because there's sporting events, there's all kinds of stuff where thousands of stadiums, baseball games, football games, everything else, nobody's wearing a mask. But somehow, 8 hours all day with the many known studies for the harm of the kiddos is somehow good. No, I don't think so. So you can't have it both ways. And even Sisolak himself has no medical license, and he has a mandate. It is our God-given right for us to breathe freely. And we're going to do so, and our children deserve it too. And it worked out way back when. But Mr. Stokes, single-handedly, for whatever reason, I don't want to get into the politics of it, took it back. So you guys can't have it both ways, and you need to do one of two things. Either be willing to sign a liability saying that you guys accept all responsibility on our kids, or you need to step down, let some people come in here and have the stones to stand up to our governor and stand up against the political theater that's happening, because our kids deserve better. And you guys need to push that agenda as far as letting our children breathe freely, which is their God-given right to do so. And this mama bear and papa bears, we're not going to be silenced anymore. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Next, we have Sally. Sorry, I'm going to get your name wrong. Bivman? Bowman? I'm sorry, Sally Bowman? Would you like to speak?
Good evening, Sally Bowman. We are in a battle for the hearts, minds, and souls of our children. Listen carefully to what I am going to read, and may it pierce each of your hearts. It is written by Thelen Polk. I do not know the lady, but I've had this for 20-some years. Children of tomorrow, I apologize to you on behalf of those in my time for the things we didn't do. We didn't stop the tyrants so your fate could be prevented. We watched them steal our freedom. By our silence, we consented. We didn't choose to circumvent the doom you've not escaped, while the Bill of Rights was murdered and the Constitution raped. Some of us were lazy, others too afraid to think about our children, the ones we have betrayed. I guess we were too busy to be concerned or care, to try to ease the burden of the chains we made you wear. We could have been good shepherds when the wolf got in the fold, but we watched the flame of freedom die instead and left you cold. But we changed our great republic, which was forged in liberty, to a socialist welfare state we called democracy. I'm sorry we were timid, my selfish generation. We left you but a remnant of a free and prosperous nation. I'm sorry for our actions. Like cowards, we behaved. We could have left you freedom. Instead, you are enslaved. Children of tomorrow, descendants of our land, I'm sorry we allowed this, the fate you now withstand. We ask all of you to stand against this horrendous CRT. Send back the funding and tell the government no. It is brainwashing at its worst. It is racism. It will create chaos and, at the worst, murder. Children murdering each other down the road. We hope not, but we see it happening. We taxpayers pay into the schools, so we have a right to speak. This is America, not Germany, and we are not domestic terrorists. This is government run amok. We are a peaceful people. Thank you, and God help us.
Thank you.
And I have copies if anybody would like one.
Thank you.
Next, we have Joy Trushinsky.
Good evening, Joy Trushinsky here. I came across an article in the Citizens Journal, Ventura County, California, dated May 31, 2021, written by Art Moore, an investigator for the Worldwide Newsroom, an independent news organization. The article was entitled, COVID Deaths Plunge After Major World City Introduces Ivermectin. I quote from the article, a citywide initiative in Mexico City to prescribe ivermectin to COVID-19 patients resulted in a plunge in hospitalizations and death. Hospitalizations were down 76%, according to research done by Mexico's Ministry of Health and the Mexican Social Security Institute. Additionally, early in May, a significant decrease in cases in India coincided with the National Health Ministry's promotion of ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine. Worldwide, more than 50 peer-reviewed studies have shown the effectiveness of ivermectin in the prevention and treatment against COVID-19 virus without harmful side effects. So why is ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine banned by doctors in the U.S., and why is only remdesivir used in hospitals when it is proving to be ineffective and causes kidney failure, seizures, and heart attacks? Why is our government pushing ineffective, dangerous gene therapy in the Moderna and Pfizer injections and pushing the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, which is known to cause blood clots?
All of these experimental injections can cause blood clots, heart attacks, heart damage, neurological damage, including paralysis and death. Yet our government will be forcing our children to get the injection in order to go to school. And they still have to wear masks anyway. This is wrong. Additionally, studies done by the University of San Francisco Salk Institute and studies published in the New England Journal of Medicine show that Moderna and Pfizer injections causes miscarriages, antibody-dependent enhancement, infertility, and reduces sperm count. All three injections contain cancer-producing material. Yet our government is pushing these injections on healthy children and adults even when there are cures. After 2 years of this fake state emergency, it is time to take a stand against this tyranny. I say, do parents do not allow COVID-19 vaccination of your children and the wearing of masks, which weakens the immune system. Do the right thing. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anybody else here wish to make in-person public comment? Please, just again, state your name, and then if you wouldn't mind afterwards, if you would just write your name down so Renee can get it.
So, good evening. Is it on? Okay. Can you hear me? Perfect.
Yes.
Good evening. My name is Elizabeth. So at the last meeting, a statement was made that this is not a Q&A, when actually it really is. We are the parents. We have questions. You people are the board. You should have the answers and be able to answer them. So when a parent comes up here and says, I have a concern, I have a question, it is for you to answer. We are the parents. We're not going anywhere. We're awake now because of everything that happened in 2020, and that is now happening in 2021. You will not get rid of us. We're not going anywhere. You can label us domestic terrorists. I'll take it. I really don't care. My children are the most important thing to me in this whole world, and I will do anything to protect them. So tonight, I had the opportunity to talk with my daughter and another high school student, and they informed me that there is a survey going on around the high school in regards to the dress code. I haven't received that survey. Students have received it. The faculty knows about it. The principal knows about it. I have not received anything, and it's been going on for weeks. So I'm wondering if you all know about it, Superintendent. Do you know about a survey in regards to the dress code?
I do not.
Okay.
But I can easily find out from Mr. Chambers what's going on.
I would greatly appreciate it because where I feel that a lot of the things in there are a little ridiculous. Girls not being able to show their shoulders, not wearing scarves in the building, not being able to wear hoodies. I think those are a little ridiculous, but I do believe that some on there are very important and need to stay on there for the well-being of our children. So if there's a survey going on, I would like it sent to me as a parent because they're minors. They are not legally adults. I send my daughter to school a certain way. I expect her to stay dressed that way. And I expect the school to enforce the dress code and to not go changing it without us knowing about it and waiting until last minute. So, and then also I wanted to address the NRS 3890.036 for the human reproductive, pretty much the health in the school district that the kids are supposed to take. I want it to be known that I don't want my child or children taking those courses because it's not the school's place to teach that to my children. It is mine. I am their parent. If I want to teach my child about his privates, I will teach him. I don't need a stranger teaching him that. If I want to teach my daughter about males' privates, I will teach her that because I am her mother. And I don't want transgender being taught to my children at school. It's my job to teach them that and how not to bully people because they're different.
Thanks. Do we have anybody else that would like to speak in person? Again, just state your name for the record, and if you can afterwards, if you wouldn't mind filling out a form just so Renee can get your name for the record.
Hi, David Lewis. Yeah, I did the form back there for you guys.
Thank you.
Yeah. So last time I got a little bit upset, which I think is reasonable considering the circumstances. And the reason being is I don't think, or I know, parents don't feel like you guys are listening to them. You don't feel like you guys care, like you don't listen to us, like it doesn't matter to you or something. I don't know. It just feels like there's a disconnection. You know, we love our kids, you know, more than anything, and that's why we're here, because we love our kids so much and we want the best for them. We want the best for all the kids. And when I hear about the things going on at CMS, that they have arrows on the floor and they have teachers in the halls with bullhorns yelling at them, I mean, no wonder there's so many fights at the school. I mean, who thought of that? My daughter has to walk. Her classroom is here, and then the next class is here, but she has to walk in the hall all the way around this long thing to get to the class that's right next door, or she'll get lunch detention. And I'm going, okay, so that's to decrease exposure for COVID. Well, now you're making the student, I mean, the policy is so crazy that now you're making the student walk this whole long length. I mean, that's increasing the exposure. So I don't know who comes up with these things, but I don't think they're thought through all the way, obviously. There's something not right there. And again, with the masks, you know, we ask, please, you know, stop with the masks. I mean, there's now evidence coming out of people actually having immune system problems because their immune systems have been so reduced from all this stuff that we've been doing, the masks included, the main factor. And now they're getting really sick when they get a normal cold. And if you don't, you know, believe it, look it up. Just Google super flu, and you can see it for yourself. Don't believe me. And I mean, I think you should really consider that. And the kids being violent at school, on the Friday before the last meeting, a kid punched another kid in the face at the middle school, sent him to the hospital, then punched the vice principal in the stomach. And then in another class, they had 3 fights in one day. I'm going, this is middle school. When I went to middle school, we had like, I don't know, well, and to Carson Valley Middle School, we had maybe like 1 or 2 fights in a year, you know? It wasn't like 3 fights in one class. So obviously all the pressure you're putting on these kids, it's not right. You guys have a chance to do something about it. You have a chance to look at yourself in the mirror later on and go, you know what? I made something better for these kids. I took a stand on a hard subject, and I gave these kids a better future by not going with the flow. And my last comment is, let's go, Brandon.
Next, please.
Sorry, just walking up and assuming I know.
It's all yours.
And it's green, so that means it's live? Hi, my name is Lisa Partee. I am a grandparent of a 3rd grader, soon to be 4th grader, or 4th grader, soon to be 5th grader. Firstly, I'd like to say my deepest condolences to my friend Stacy. We love you. Second, thank you for doing all that you do on the school board. Secondly, I just wanted to say that I haven't been to a school board meeting for a couple of weeks or a couple of meetings because we've had life going on. And we're watching and we're observing and we're frustrated. And I get why all these folks are frustrated. Firstly, that one time when Dr. Schallenberger was supposed to speak, but Mr. Stokes spoke instead about the definition of equity. And I'm grateful that people spoke up and said, why do we need this? We don't need this. There truly really is no definition for equity in that way. And dipping the toes into the realm of equity was, I think, irresponsible at best. It's a national thing. It's not necessary. It's not helpful. And I understand that the president thought that the meeting was uncomfortable because you were being attacked. You weren't being attacked. It was just people speaking out because they saw what they saw. They had gone to a meeting. They saw one thing. They come here. They hear another thing. And they just
voice their opinions. If that makes you uncomfortable, so be it. You are making our city uncomfortable, our students uncomfortable, our parents uncomfortable, and we are upset. And we have every right to speak out. And if it makes you uncomfortable, so be it. This is what you signed up for, to be on this board and to be a superintendent. You work for the citizens, the parents, and the students. Please remember that. Please start to work with the rest of us. This is not about this national movement to CRT. And you need to get back to reading, writing, arithmetic, and the students. And consider that, because that's the most important. This is our next generation. And the vaccinations, the testing, and all, is so unnecessary. They don't get the disease. It's a push, it's a narrative, and it needs to be stopped right now. Thank you.
Way to go.
Thank you. Any additional in-person public comment? Sorry. Karen, please.
Good evening. My name's Karen Stevens. Should know my name by now because I've been here every board meeting since the beginning of May and still frustrated. I would like to talk to the parents that are here and watching the video. Just as people prep for disaster, I think parents need to start prepping for situations coming up that you do not want your children involved in. These mask mandates don't seem to ever stop. And now it's looking like we've been warned that there may be inoculations coming down the line for the children. We know they're already doing them at last month, I guess it was at the high school. Not mandatory yet, but people are under the impression they need to have their precious child inoculated to go to Disneyland when really their health is more important. So people start thinking of alternatives from the government school and look into homeschooling, look into private schools, because your children's lives depend on it. Don't allow these ridiculous killer inoculations be jabbed into your child's arm. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional in-person public comment? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to close in-person public comment. Renee, do we have any remote public comment?
Let me check, Mr. Cassiopo. I just was able to refresh. No, Mr. Cassiopo, I have no public comment via email. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So public comment is closed for this evening. Thank you, everybody. Item 7, discussion and possible action on approval of recommendations of the Benefits Committee regarding group healthcare insurance, plan design, and renewal of coverage for the calendar year, January 1, 2022 through December 31, 2022. This is for possible action. We have Andrew Fueling and Valerie Clark.
Thank you. Thank you, President Cassiopo. AJ Fueling for the record. This evening, we have Valerie Clark from Clark & Associates with us. After a number of months of meetings, thanks to the work of our Benefits Committee, the support of our association representatives from OCA, we had Eric Tedrow from CISA, Carrie Finn, and from our administrators, Dr. Jen Ward-Joseph. After these months of, or through these months of meetings, we had Valerie Clark and her compatriot, Melissa Davies, guiding us through this process and generating working with Prominence and others to generate possible packages for our renewal. After some soft years and years past where Valerie was able to negotiate rate reductions and some rate passes for us, the last couple years have gotten a little tougher with utilization and costs increasing. Fortunately, last year, Valerie was able to negotiate a 9% cap for us, in which, in the time of uncertainty that we were in, was very appreciated. So looking at the new year, I will defer to Valerie to walk us through what we have here as approved by the Benefits Committee.
Thanks, AJ. Valerie Clark, for the record, with Clark and Associates. My office is in Reno. It's a pleasure to be here with you tonight. I think it's my 20th year in front of you this time of year again. Yes, and as just taking off what AJ said, we've had since 2019 been hovering right around 100% loss ratio, which makes it very difficult to negotiate the traditional rate reductions and rate passes that we had enjoyed for a number of years prior to that. We had negotiated a 9% rate cap this year, if you may recall, when I was here in front of you last year. We were fortunate enough to, although we hovered right at 100% loss ratio again, Prominence Health Plan did give us a 7.7% rate increase, which in our world is a very good renewal. We also were able to negotiate another year, a rate cap again of 9% next year. Hopefully we won't even need to go to 9, but it's just nice to know, mostly for planning purposes with the budget, that we can assure you that next time this year we will not be handing you anything more than 9%. And hopefully less. That's always our goal, is to stay under, to keep your renewal very, very low, if not even, lower than what it already is. And we have done that in the past. So the medical insurance will renew with Prominence with a 7.7% rate increase, 9% rate cap going into the following year. All of your ancillary benefits will renew with no rate change at all. I believe the vision changed just pennies, but other than that, your dental and your life insurance will renew with no change. And I would be happy to take any questions you may have.
Thanks, Valerie. Does the board have any questions? Stacy?
Is this something that's going to be brought up with the Joint Advisory Committee for the next year? Is this part of that meeting?
So Trustee Wilkie, the Joint Advisory Committee doesn't deal with the health insurance policy. That's something that is done through the Benefits Committee that Valerie and AJ and Dr. Delphin and I sit on, as do members of our employee groups. But the ultimate discussion about benefits does happen at the negotiations table with each individual bargaining unit.
Thank you, and thank you, Valerie, again. We appreciate you hanging on there for us. We do it every year, but
Thank you.
been
It's
doing a
my
great job.
pleasure.
And then AJ, did you have that in the budget when you gave us the budget? Did it have the 7.7 or somewhere around there?
Thank you, Trustee Wilkie. AJ Feeling for the record. Yeah, so in the budget that you approved in May, we had the 9% number in there as the cap. So this comes in slightly lower than that. Overall, across all of our funds, it saves about, I think, $80 to $100,000, depending. So it's coming in a little bit less than what we had budgeted.
Any other board question or comments? Richard?
Yeah, just to clarify, the rate increase this year would be $241,000 above what we're paying, or for the next year, I mean, versus what we're paying now? Is that the way I'm reading this?
Number AJ?
That is correct. That is for based on the number of participants we have on the HMO plan, which is, I think it's the third page of the document you were given.
I was looking at page number.
Right.
Gary, I think, or two.
And then the next page is the PPO plan, which is the Freedom Plan. That one will increase in cost by about 100,000. It's that bottom number on the page. And
Looks to me like about 550.
yeah, overall, yeah, it's about 500 to 550. But again, that was a part of what was budgeted.
Okay, so overall is 550,000.
Correct.
Is that pretty much in line with what other districts are seeing too?
Mm-hmm. Yep. The ones that I know of, yes.
Any further questions? No, Valerie, thank you. I know in my daytime line of work, unrelated to the school district, we've been going through increases for, I hate to say, as long as I can remember. So I appreciate the work you're doing to keep our increases at a minimum, if you will. So thank you. I appreciate the hard work.
Thank you.
I know it's not easy.
My pleasure.
Okay, folks, this is for possible action. Go ahead, Laurel.
Okay. I move that the Carson City School District Board of Trustees accept and approve the recommendations of the Benefits Committee as submitted for the renewal of coverage for the calendar year of January 1st, 2022 through December 31st, 2022.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further board discussion? Seeing none, any public comment on this topic? Any remote public comment, Renee?
No, Mr. Cassiopo.
Okay, board, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, item 8, annual report from the Carson City School District Family Life Committee for the 2020-2021 school year. This is for discussion only. And looks like we have Tasha. Please. Whoops.
Yes, thank you, President Cassiopo. I'm obviously not Sheila's story. Sheila was not able to be with us this evening. She is a new grandmother. Her daughter had a baby girl today, so she has a good reason for skipping out on us this evening. But I will be filling in for her. Actually, Mrs. Macy will be joining me as well for item number 9, I believe it is. So the Family Life Advisory Committee met 5 times last year over Zoom. We had an excellent group of individuals who actively participated in our meetings. They provided great knowledge, understanding, and insight to the materials presented, followed by a healthy discussion. Just as a recap, I believe all of you are aware, but our Family Life Advisory Committee is charged with reviewing materials as it relates to sex education and determining what grade levels those materials would be appropriate for. So that's typically what the responsibility of that committee is. So every year, and I did attend all the meetings last year and the year before, we first start out by reviewing the Family Life Advisory Committee rules and procedures. So there's actually a rule book, if you will, that you've all seen. We haven't done any updates or changes to the bylaws of the committee since 2019. But we do review them with our committee every year to make sure that folks know what the scope and purview of the committee is and what their responsibilities are for advising the board. So we go through that. Then we also went through Nevada Revised Statute 389.036, which in essence directs the board to create that advisory committee and determines what the committee members are comprised of. So that is actually what we've built our committee off of. So our committee has 5 parents of children who attend schools in our district, and then 4 representatives from one of each of the 4 following groups. So we have representatives from medicine or nursing, counseling, religion, pupils who attend schools in our district, and teaching. So we have a committee of 9 folks from those area, again, 5 parents. So we go through NRS so they know what law is kind of directing the work that we do as well. Last year in the state of Nevada, we adopted as a state new health standards. So last year, because we had new health standards, we actually went through the health standards with our committee so they could understand what materials we were selecting or choosing or determining whether or not they were appropriate for which standards, because there does have to be a standards alignment. So it's not just a matter of reviewing materials for the sake of reviewing materials. So we did go through our health standards, and then we had 5 different sources of materials or instruction materials that were asked of that advisory committee to review and determine whether or not they were appropriate. So you have that list in your board packet. An example is that blue campaign on human trafficking and an introductory video on what human trafficking is. So that was approved for 5th grade and up. Human trafficking is part of our new standards. So we are required to, of course, inform our students of what that is and things to be cautious of or look for. There was a video, How Do Contraceptives Work? That was approved, slides on the male and female reproductive systems, and then a presentation by Transgendered Allies Group. I think it's important to note that although these resources basically get screened and determined to be appropriate, they're not required of teachers to use in the classroom. It simply becomes a list of resources that they can choose to use. So in addition to that, you have in your packets a list of materials that have been previously approved since 2016 and beyond as well. That was a request of our board, our advisory board members themselves, as they wanted to know what previous advisory board groups had approved. So that is, you have that in your materials as well. So that is, in essence, the work that the committee did last year. We do have 2 vacancies, so that's what our next agenda item is about, that we will be asking you to approve new members, but that's our next agenda item. So beyond that, do you have any questions of me? I'd be happy to answer them for you.
So these materials are not required by the teachers to be used, but if they are used by the teachers, do you know if their parents have the right to either opt in or opt out of any of these materials?
Thank you, Trustee Crossman. I'm so glad you asked that question because I had intended to mention that. So when it comes to sex education and sexually transmitted diseases, we are required to send home permission slips to families. And it is not a passive permission, which means we actually have to have a signed permission slip from a parent or guardian stating that their child can have that unit of instruction. So if we don't get a signed permission slip back, or if the family decides to opt their child out, then we do provide an alternative assignment or alternative work for the student to do. That is quite all right. I think it's related. I'm happy to answer that. So absolutely. Sheila is our committee chairperson. You can always reach out to Sheila's Story. You can, I would suggest that our parents reach out to me as well, or Mrs. Macy. So all 3 of us are actively involved with the committee and oversight of the committee. So any 3 of us or all 3 of us, and we'd be happy to give our families direction on how to get involved.
And so you were saying these topics, sorry for lack of a better word, it's been a long day for me, have been approved but don't have to be used. So how do we control, I mean, we hear from parents sometimes that while we say this and this may be the requirement, what's to stop a teacher from going rogue and saying, adding this as a better slideshow to present to these kids? What kind of checks and balances do we have?
So in our district, all primary instruction materials have to be adopted by the board. You have all adopted for us numerous materials in the past, really 6 to 7 years. We've put a real strong emphasis on replenishing those. So with the health standards just being adopted at the state level last year in October, we are currently unwrapping the health standards. What that means is we have to take the standard themselves, break it down into units of instruction, decide exactly what that looks like and should look like in terms of instruction, and then we have to pick instruction materials. Instruction materials are actually now adopted at the state level. So I don't believe the state is looking to adopt new instruction materials for health until next year. I just had a meeting this morning because I do sit on the state's instructional materials steering committee. So I am a representative of that group. So I think the new adoption will be put off until next year. What that means is in the meantime is that our teachers are required to teach the standards to the best of their ability. So we do have currently adopted health texts that are used. And then if there's materials or if there's standards that are now been adopted that aren't covered in our adopted instruction materials, that's when they have to go to this list of approved supplementary materials. And they are not permitted to utilize anything that's not on this adopted list of supplementary materials. Our health teachers are well aware of that, and they do know that there is these are sensitive topics, and we actually don't get many opt-outs each year. I think last year, honestly, in the middle school level, I think we only had one opt-out. But we do have an opt-out or two every year. So our teachers are well-versed in that process of sending out those permission slips. We do have procedures in place at each school again. So when a family says, no, I don't want my child to be part of that class at that time, that there's already processes in place again for those alternative assignments and alternative placement. So we don't want the student to be uncomfortable. So they just join another class and, participate in another curriculum at that time. So we've been doing this for years. I'm not actually sure how long, but since at least 2016. And so those processes are in place.
Okay. Thank you. And then just last question, so I'm clear, because I know it's a concern to some parents as well. These types of topics are taught in a health class at certain levels. They don't bleed into or take in or take away from other topics like English, math, those kinds of things.
So that's a great question, President Casiopo. So there are some cross-curricular topics. I think the best way to look at this is that by state law, anything that is related to sex education is covered underneath this law, and those materials have to be reviewed by this committee and approved by the board. So even if those topics were to cross over, for instance, into a Health Science 1 class, for instance, at Carson High School, so they have Health Science 1, those teachers are also well aware of that state law and of that requirement. You may see, so a difference would be in K-5, so the health standards go kindergarten through high school. The way they're written is they have K-5 standards, and then middle school standards, and then high school standards. In middle school, these standards are covered in a semester-long health class. We have a health teacher at each of our middle schools. At the high school levels, they're covered in a one-semester health class that is typically given during the freshman year of high school. And of course, there are health teachers at the secondary level. In the elementary levels, K through 5, the responsibility is actually of the general education, the regular classroom teacher. Some of the topics, not in sex ed, so just know that the health curriculum or the health standards are much broader than that. It goes into things like, how do we make a healthy diet? How do we eat, make sure that we're not eating fast food all the time? How do we make good decisions? That kind of thing. So those topics, some of them are covered in the PE classes, for instance, the PE specials at the elementary. Some of them cross over with science. For instance, when you're talking about a food pyramid, those standards have a tendency to cross over with science standards, but not the sex ed part. So the sex ed part is very specific, and at the lower grades, so anyone can look at the state standards for health. They are in the Nevada Department of Health or Nevada Department of Education. But what's covered at the elementary level is much more related to sex education, if you will. Of course, there is awareness of self, that kind of thing, but you don't really get into like sexually transmitted diseases and those heavier topics until middle school and high school. And again, then they're taught by health teachers. So under state law, the teachers who teach those sex ed courses, it can only be taught by a licensed health teacher in our state, and or believe it or not, like our school nurses can teach that. So there's specific licenses that are attached to that as well.
Thank you. Richard?
I know the board approves the purchase of curriculum, but on these 5 classes for 2021, I just want to make sure that the public knows those did not come before the board for approval, right?
So correct, because that is the task that you've given to the Family Life Advisory Committee. So you hire or approve those members. Those members then are with that advisory committee are the ones who review it. And again, you have Sheila's story, and then you have educators. For instance, Erin Bean was one of our health teachers who are extremely familiar with the health state curriculum, who help advise that committee, and then that committee approves that. So you ultimately, by proxy, I guess, approve them, but through the oversight of the committee and through this annual report that I'm bringing to you to say these are the items that the committee reviewed and found to be appropriate for those grade levels.
And also, I think I was told that someone in the district office reviews these courses before they're taught. Is that correct?
Well, I served on the committee for the past 2 years, so for every one of those things, I
you're
was
on
there
that.
and I observed all of the materials as well, so I have firsthand knowledge of that. Mrs. Macy is taking on that responsibility this year, so as we go through the year, she will be there to observe or to see all of the slides, if you will, or the YouTube video or the presentation. Sometimes they're presentation by different community groups that will come in and do like suicide prevention. And just so you know too, actually, I'm glad that came up. We actually put more in front of this committee than is required by state law. So when I mention things like suicide, et cetera, those aren't required to be covered by the Family Life Advisory Committee, but anything that we feel is going to be of sensitive nature, we like to put in front of the Family Life Advisory Committee anyways, since we have parents and we have community representatives. So we feel that's a good place to basically, if you will, vet or preview and get that input and that feedback and have that dialogue about whether or not it would be appropriate for use in schools. So that is how we've run our program thus far.
Any other board questions? Okay, thank you. We will move on to item 9.
You're welcome.
Discussion and possible action to approve the selection of Family Life Committee members to serve 3-year terms, October 2021 to October 2024, in the following categories: 1 religious representative and 1 teacher representative. This is for possible action.
Good evening, President Casiopo and members of the board. I am Cheryl Macy, Director of Equity and Curriculum and Instruction. And this year for the Family Life Advisory Committee, we had 2 outgoing members. Erin Bean, who served as our teacher representative, and Chris White, who served as our religious representative. To fill these positions, we have 2 new members that we are offering up today, Jennifer Minifee and Vanessa White. Mrs. Minifee couldn't be here tonight. As a health and personal fitness teacher, as well as a Carson High School health and PE department chair, Mrs. Minifee will represent the classroom teacher perspective. Mrs. Minifee has been teaching at Carson High School for 26 years and is well respected for her knowledge and her leadership in our district. With us tonight is Vanessa White. Ms. White is a licensed minister and nurse. In her letter of interest, Ms. White states that she cares about what our children and youth are learning and that she has a healthy balance of medical education as well as moral relevancy. To fill the teaching positions, just so you know, we sent out a district-wide email announcing the vacancy in the position and gave any teacher an opportunity to submit a letter of interest. And for the religious representative position, we posted a statement in the Nevada Appeal legal section announcing the vacancy, and letters had to be submitted to us by October 19th. We received 2 letters, one for our teacher, Mrs. Minifee, and the other from Ms. White for the religious representative.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any questions for Cheryl or for Ms. White? Lupe, why don't you go first?
I do have a question. We do have a parent as part of the committee, correct?
I do believe in your board packet is the list of the committee members, and we have a number of parents on the committee. It looks like 4 parents on the committee. 5, thank you. 5.
Thank you.
Yes, so there's pretty good parent representation.
Tash, if you some for the record, just to add to that. So we currently have Candace McDaniel, Stephanie Cook, Dan Thornton, Valerie Melendez, and Kendra Williams are our 5 parents. When we bring people onto the board, when you approve them to serve on this committee, they serve 3-year terms, an initial 3-year term. When their 3-year term is up, they have the ability to re-sign up, if you will, to serve with us for another 3 years, but those go in front of you as well before they re-up. So currently at this time, Ms. McDaniel's serving with us from 2021 to 2024. Ms. Cook is 2019 to 2022. Mr. Thornton is 2019 to 2022. And Ms. Melendez is from 2020 to 2023, in case you don't have that in your packet. But we do have five parents that have been serving with us for at least 1 year, and some 2 and 3 years.
Thank you for that clarification. And I would just like to make a recommendation in the future if we are able to promote these opportunities, perhaps through Parent Square, so we can actually get more parents involved. I'd like to see more diversification in this group.
I appreciate that as well. So just to know that the 5 spots again, so when we do have a parent opening, we didn't have a parent opening this year. When we do promote those out. This board has actually interviewed multiple parents for the same position before and had to select between different candidates. So, but we just don't have a parent opening at this point in time.
Do the 5 parents do the 5 parents we have on the board now, I don't need specifics, but do they provide representation throughout the district in terms of grade level, elementary, middle, high school?
Yes, sir, they do.
So there's a breakdown. We had at least one person from each level?
Yes, sir.
Okay. True. Thank you. Richard?
No, I'd just like to say, I don't really have a question, but I'd just like to thank Vanessa and Jennifer for stepping up and being willing to serve on this committee. It's a big job, and I just want to say thank you for your willingness to do it.
Laurel?
Just the comment too, I've known Jennifer for a lot of years. And so I'm grateful for her willing to do that. And Vanessa, I'm grateful for your willingness to serve, and you seem uniquely qualified to really be an asset to this committee. So I really appreciate that.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Any questions from the board? Those of you presenting? Okay, you don't have to. All right, thank you very much. This is an action item, so I'll bring it back to the board for a motion. Dawn?
I'll make a motion. I move that the Carson City School Board of Trustees approve the selection of Vanessa White as the religious representative and Jennifer Menifee as the teacher representative to serve on the Family Life Advisory Committee for a 3-year term, October 2021 until October 2024.
Second by Wilkie.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Do we have any further board discussion? Seeing none, do we have any public comment on this topic? Sir, please. Yeah, come on up. It's the same 3-minute rule.
So I thought everything seemed, David Lewis, everything in the list for the sexual education looked okay, except for the last item. And it disturbs me that the committee selects, that you appoint, and that you then don't actually approve what they select. So it's only done, like she said, but kind of by proxy. So they can just select whatever they want, and then nobody votes on it. Nobody has any control after that because they've just selected what they want. And My problem is with the last item with the tag part. So I don't think that needs to be pushed in the schools at a sixth grade level at all. Now, I have nothing against transgender people. I worked with a transgender woman who was a dear friend at work that sadly passed away from cancer a few months ago. So I have no problems, and I don't think they should ever be disrespected or treated badly. But at the same time, I don't believe that that's something that should be pushed on sixth graders. That we should be telling them that, well, you might not really be a girl, or you might really not really be a boy, because I don't think at sixth grade you really have the maturity or the faculties to start making those kinds of decisions yet. I think you need a little more time and life experience before you start, venturing down those roads. And so I think that's highly inappropriate to be teaching that to sixth graders, probably even high school students. I mean, if they want to venture out on their own and learn about that stuff, great. Or if their parents want to share that with them, and if there's a need, I'm sure their parents will. But I don't think that's the proper place for the schools to be implementing that into a child's head at all. Because I honestly, I don't think it does the child a service at all to even make them question their identity.
Mr. President, I don't mean to interrupt, and I apologize to the speaker, but we are limited to public comment on the agenda item itself, and the agenda item is the appointment of the individuals, not the material that's presented.
Well, so I misunderstood what the whole thing was, but I'm fine with their appointment. But but why didn't we have public comments on the other portion then? If
Yeah, I
it's an
think-
action item, why didn't we have public comment?
The other one wasn't an action item. It was just for discussion. They were just presenting this to us and we weren't voting on it.
Okay,
And
so
that's why we didn't have public comment. We have general public comment at the beginning of the meeting, and then we have public comment on every action item. And discussion items, there is no public comment.
will it be a public comment later on? Like, will it be an action item?
Once if this comes back to us, Tasha had mentioned next year, when we're looking at new curriculums, they present those to us and then we approve new curriculums. So at that time, as we're discussing and approving a new curriculum, there would be public comment on that.
And Mr. President, I don't mean to interrupt, but anybody could comment on those issues in the general period of public comment.
Correct. Thank you for the clarification.
It's not,
So we're stuck with them for a year, basically. Okay, all right, thanks.
Thank you. Okay, any remote public comment, Renee?
No, Mr. Cassiopo, thank you.
Okay, back to the board. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Thank you again. So we're going to move on now to item 10. Item 10, discussion and possible action to approve proposed changes to CCSD policy 805, emergency operations of schools. This is a second reading and it is for possible action. Superintendent Stokes.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. At our last school board meeting, you had an opportunity to take a look at, in its first reading, possible modifications to Carson City School District Board Policy Number 805. And just briefly, there were three fundamental components of the proposed modifications. One is that we used the more uniform title of Carson City School District Board of Trustees, and that brings this particular policy up to speed with how we've been using the board's title in other policy changes. And then we are also proposing that the bottom two paragraphs be struck from this particular policy. One, because the information that we train for and that we have drills for are actually part of our emergency operations protocol that we use every year, and those items are also identified in statute. So it's a bit of a redundancy to include those in our policy. And then we also cover the topic of inclement weather in our board regulation, which I'll go through in our next agenda item. So I stand ready to answer any questions, should you have them, regarding these proposed modifications for Board Policy 805.
Thank you, Richard. Does the board have any questions for Superintendent Stokes? Okay, seeing none, this one is an action item.
So, Mr. President, I'll move that the Carson City School District Board of Trustees approve the proposed revisions to CCSD Policy 805 to include October 26, 2021 as the revised date.
Second.
Okay, motion by Trustee Walker, second by Trustee Varner. Any further board discussion? Seeing none. Any public comment on this agenda item? Seeing none. Any remote public comment, Renee?
No, Mr. Cassiopo.
Thank you, board. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Let's see, where am I at? Item 11. Discussion and proposed changes to CCSD Regulation 805, Emergency Operations of Schools. This one's for discussion only, and for the benefit of the public, the board will vote on policies when they're presented to us, but typically not regulations. That's presented to us as information. Superintendent Stokes?
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. And just as some additional information, regulations typically govern how we do things at the site. The policies are typically given as a general statement by which we operate that gives a sense of our vision and our obligations, our intentions, whereas the regulations are actually what we do in a day-by-day situation. So it has been a number of years since we have made any modifications, and typically when we do change an aspect of one of our policies, we also will take a look at the regulations. And so you'll note in the document that you have in front of you that anything that is an addition shows up in bold text, and it's also italicized so that it stands out for you to see where those changes are in terms of additions. And anything that's being suggested as being removed will show up as a strike-through. So the first item that I'd like to bring your attention to that represents an addition is at the bottom of page 2. And it seemed that, especially based on the pandemic from last year, we fielded a number of questions in my office, and I'm sure the schools did as well, to let our community members know that even though we have the capacity, the equipment, the internet, the technology to perform school from a remote location, the Department of Education still does not recognize that ability as a school day in session. And so we are unable to have, say, for example, a snow day and call it a school day in session because we can have school with the kids at home and the teachers at a computer, simply because we don't have the capacity through the state of Nevada. There's not a law that recognizes that process. And so I thought that it would be good for us to include that language, or at least that explanation, in the regulation, so that when people know that we have to call a day because of either man-made emergencies or weather-related emergencies, those days do have to be made up. So the whole part of this additional paragraph at the bottom of page 2 is simply to give and provide more information about how schools are operating. Now, just as an aside, I did speak with the superintendent of public instruction, and this is something that they're looking at in future years. And so I'm hoping that the legislature might be able to change this concept simply because as all of the school districts in the state of Nevada went through the pandemic, all of the kids, all of the students, I should say, and teachers, school districts have the ability to conduct remote classrooms. And so I'm hoping that that's something that can actually change in the near future. Are there any questions on that particular part of the work?
Laurel?
Really a question, but just, I don't think smoke days needs to be capitalized.
Okay.
That was just.
But they were really serious this year.
Thank you for that. Then, moving down the final paragraph on page 2, we did have, obviously, smoke from wildfires that impacted our operations, and so we did insert that language into the bottom paragraph. And instead of just identifying a snow day, this really could have been Monday if we would have had too much rainfall that caused maybe one of our buildings or several of our buildings not to be able to be inhabited on that particular day. So we thought that covered a little bit more ground than just identifying it solely as a snow day. The next item is on page 3. And when this document was first developed, and before I should say, the supervisor of the transportation department was very active in helping to make some of the decisions about the start of school. And one of the jobs that the transportation supervisor had based on the original language was to contact our media outlets to let people know when school was going to be canceled. Since that time, we've hired Mr. Davis, who has a great relationship and rapport with our media outlets, and so it has fallen to him to make that initial contact, and our media outlets recognize him and his title and his position within the school district. So it made sense that we make a change there and insert the public information officer instead of the transportation supervisor. Also, in the old regulation, we identified in that same paragraph, in the past, we used an auto-dialing system that we referred to as school messenger. We no longer have that item. We have another auto-dialing system that you've heard as Parent Square. So rather than naming these things by their vendor's name, we've just referred to them generally as the district's automated notification system. That'll keep us from coming back each time there's a change in or an update, modification in the auto dialing system. At the bottom, near the bottom of page 3, we also included as one of the areas that we would use to notify the public in case of an emergency to schools is the district social media sites. And we've included Twitter, Facebook, that's kind of what it seems like some days, Facebook, and so we would certainly add any others if there seems to be a change in those particular social media sites. On the top of page 4, there was an addition having to do with air quality and school closure. And I know that we worked through this with a number of folks at the start of this school year. And as you remember, we had fires for a lot of days. And the question always was, when is the air quality so bad that we don't or can't have school? And so you might want to take a look at item A under air quality and school closures. And maybe I'll just read this so that we can talk about this, and you can tell me if you believe there needs to be any modifications or changes. It reads, the superintendent will review the airnow.gov Air Quality Index, or AQI, and the day's weather forecast. So I'm sure, as you know, it's not just one particular reading. There's a number of things that cause the air quality in the area to be better or worse, and that's really difficult to determine sometimes. So trying to tell whether or not there's going to be wind that day, or looking at some of the maps that are available on what those air quality numbers are going to look like. Carrying on, if the AQI is reported at or above 400 by airnow.gov for the 89701 zip code by 5:30 a.m. and weather forecast predicts that conditions are not expected to improve, all employees, students, and families will be notified using the district's automated notification system that school will be canceled. Additionally, if the school day begins and the AQI reaches or exceeds 400, school will remain in session for the day and students and staff will remain indoors until the regular school day ends. So I'll try to walk you through some of the thinking behind these numbers and decision-making points. The document that we have used to help make these decisions come from the NIAA, or the Nevada Interscholastic Athletics Association. And the numbers between 1 or 0, I should say, and 500 are actually identified as the numbers used by the NIAA's chart, but they're also the numbers that are used by airnow.gov. And so I think that's important to recognize because there are other systems that don't use that 0 to 500 air quality index number. And so some people have said, well, wait a second, I have this number that says 100 on Purple Air, which might read 500 plus on the airnow.gov. And so we had to make a determination as to which one of those systems we were going to use. We finalized the decision around airnow.gov because that is a government-operated site. And even though there are far more numbers of sensors associated with a group called Purple Air, those numbers are spread all throughout the area. And so it could be akin to having your monitor right next to a location where a fire is burning strongly. And so that number is going to be very high. Whereas a monitor being located in another part of the city or in the valley might have a completely different number. So we had to somehow find a way to find a consistent method that was always the same. You hate to ever think that someone might be trying to manipulate the numbers just to get out of school, but it is completely possible for someone to maybe build a fire in a ball of newspapers and blow that right into the device that's used to make the reading. So having a government system, something that's regulated regularly, and right here where that device is located would be at the 89701 zip code. That would be an attempt to try to really standardize and unify that number, realizing that there's going to be people with differing numbers in differing parts of in our valley. So the number 400 was determined because the highest number is 500, as you know, and with the NIAA's guidance, they're still saying that school is possible up to 500 as long as people stay inside the schools. As long as you're not going outside, you're not running, you're not breathing hard. Commercial buildings are designed to have good air return systems. As you know, we've worked hard, especially during the pandemic, to have a filtering system. Now, this does not mean that we are able to keep 100% of the air impurities out of our buildings. Our doors are coming open, they're getting closed, people are coming, people are going. But in general, people are safe inside of our buildings, and that's one of the reasons that why at 400 we're asking folks to stay in. Actually, they're staying indoors after we get to the number 150, and so we're taking those precautions to help protect our students and our staff. But like the year that we had this year, if we would have begun early, we would have had a number of, let me start over. If we had had numbers below 400, we would have had a high number of days where we couldn't have had school. And so we felt that we were still within a number that's recognized by a state authority And we felt that 400 was a good number to help us stay in school and still be able to carry on as long as we were careful about how the students were asked to participate. So I'd love for any feedback that you might have with regard to this. I know that you folks probably were asked questions with regard to the decisions that were made on behalf of this particular item.
One of the things I'm wondering, I like that you put in there about if the conditions change. Once families get their kids to school, they might work out of the area. They can't just come pick up their little guys. So I think that that's wise. I'm just wondering if you don't want to put something in there about once it reaches a certain level, all outdoor activity will cease. Maybe address physical education, because I think one of the things that in a situation like that, I'd rather not have the principals and PE teachers and elementary teachers trying to figure out what we mean by that. So it would probably be wise to add a little bit more detail.
Thank you, Mr. Walker.
That was going to be my comment as well. If all outdoor activities are stopped at the level of 150, where it reaches, isn't that unhealthy air for all, then I think it would be important to include that so that it's the same for all sites, whether it's recess, and I'm so sorry that the teachers had to do that this year. But I understand why, but I just know it's hard on them. But for that or PE or any of those activities. And then just thinking back with the NIAA and their air quality, when they allow activities to continue, do they still allow like indoor sporting events, depending on where the air quality is, just for clarification on that?
Thank you, Trustee Crossman. Typically, if the building has the space inside, they do hold their practices indoors. So even if the number is quite high versus the 150 and the students are staying indoors, they still have been able to carry on with their practices inside.
Any other board questions? Seeing none. Richard, did you have anything else? You want to continue?
Just a few other items here. You'll notice that kind of in the middle of the page, just below where we were, we struck the time for decisions to close schools being 5 a.m. Sometimes it's not right at, and sometimes it's before. So having a little flexibility there and not putting that number out there prevents the schools from being questioned about, hey, how come I didn't get some kind of notice by 10 after 5? And so we do our best whenever we've got an understanding that we're looking at some sort of a weather event, we're up and checking those conditions. Certainly we can leave that if anybody feels strongly, but that's a recommendation that we have for you today. I also wanted to bring to your attention on page 5, much of the text that is under personnel responsibilities comes from our collective bargaining agreements, but there's some pieces to this that are less clear, and so I've simply tried to add some language that would help staff members know what their expectations are. For example, we make the statement that if school is being delayed, and if it's being delayed because it's dangerous for students to come to school, we should also take into account that it's likely dangerous for our staff members as well. But then there's always that question, well, we know that if school's on a delayed start, we need adults there to help the operations of the building start. And so we have given a statement there, for example, number 2, under delayed opening, that there's a 15-minute window there that we ask our staff to be in their workplaces prior to the regular or the delayed start of school. And that just gives people something to shoot for. If it's a delayed start, they're going to be knowing that they've got to leave a little early anyway, based on conditions. And so just trying to give both principals and staff members some added guidance as we try to make the best out of a tough situation. So anytime we have a delayed start or even a cancellation, it's out of the usual and customary, and sometimes makes things just a little more difficult. And the more information we can provide, the smoother things seem to go. So, Mr. President, that's all I have, unless there are questions.
Thank you, Mr. Stokes. Mike?
So, Mr. Stokes, I guess the one other thing that I'm wondering about is breakfast is always an issue. So I see in there it says may not be served. My concern is families that need it the most really count on that breakfast, and those kids come to school expecting it. And so I don't know if we could do something to make sure maybe breakfast is a grab and go that day or something fast. But I know that even when we have delayed starts, I have little guys show up and they don't care that lunch is going to be in an hour. They are expecting breakfast.
And we could change that language to grab and go. We tried to say may because I've not talked with a principal yet who hasn't been willing to say, well, we'll find some granola bars in the kitchen, we'll find something. And
I just think if we have may in there, it gives latitude. I think we just need to remember there are little kids and kids whose parents might not be home that can't plan accordingly. And if a little guy shows up to school hungry, I want to make sure that they have food.
Okay, thank you for that, Mr. Walker.
Good comment. Anybody else on the board?
So if that's true, would the nutrition staff that comes in, would it fall under the ERT pay?
If it is a closed day, so school has been canceled, typically their services wouldn't be needed. So they're probably not expected to be part of the ERT. Now, that doesn't mean that they couldn't be. Say, for example, a member of our nutrition staff lived right around the corner from the school, and the principal knew that, and it might be easier for that staff member to come in and actually help direct traffic or answer phones or guide students or people who might come to the school. So that would still be up to the principal to make that call. But typically they wouldn't be asked to come in and prepare food because there's no school.
Is the 15 minutes prior to the start of the school day adequate for them to prepare a meal or to get some kind of nutrition to the students?
So we're talking about a delayed start
Yeah, delayed
under
start.
that condition. They'd have to hustle.
Yeah.
But at the same time,
15 minutes is pretty.
they might be able to use other materials that might not take the same amount of time to prepare. We have those materials on hand, so it's not going to be that anyone would go hungry.
Yeah, I
It
just
might
thought
not be
15
pizza,
minutes
though.
was kind of tight time frame.
Well, and that's
Fortunately, we don't
suggested it
have a
might
lot
be
of those.
grab and go, whereas it might be something that's not a lot of prep work, but it's important that we have something available. I mean,
Yeah, I
fruit
agree.
and yogurt is something that they could grab and go. It's a little nourishment. Those muffins are in prepackaged containers. It's like you give a kid a banana, a muffin, and yogurt. Let's get the day started type deal.
Yeah, I don't think anybody disagrees that it's important.
No, thank you. Any other board comments? Lupe? No? Oh, okay. Okay, thank you, Richard. Okay, item 12. Hopefully this is going to be a simple one. Discussion and possible action to cancel the December 28, 2001 school board meeting. This is for possible action, and simply put, it's holiday season, it's right after Christmas. And what we find are people have holiday plans, holiday schedules. not just us, but teachers and parents and whatnot, and they're trying to get away. And if we have a meeting during that time, a lot of people may not be able to listen in. So that's kind of the rationale behind that decision. Otherwise, I'd love to see all your shiny faces, or I guess in these days, half of your faces. So anyway, this is an action item.
I move that the Carson City School District Board of Trustees cancel the December 28th, 2021 school board meeting.
Okay, sorry, who was the second? Lupe? Okay. All right, any further board discussion on this? We have a motion and a second. Seeing none, any public comment on this topic? Please. Again, just state your name.
Okay. So my name's Elizabeth, and my only question is with this being canceled, are you guys just going to add whatever possible stuff comes out at that time through the governor or through the state board onto the next meeting? And if that happens, are you going to make sure that certain things, if they possibly are on there, like say a mandated vaccine, rumor has it, it's going to happen during the vacation, that you will make sure that there is a spot on here for the discussion in regards to that and, you know, anything like that?
Yeah, we wouldn't slip that under the rug, if you will. I mean, if we get that information, again, we're not going to come up with that on ourselves, but if it gets passed down and says, attention all school boards, yeah, we're going to have to get that out and put that on our agenda. And it would just typically anything that would have been on that December 28th agenda would just move to the next agenda. Sometimes over the next two, depending on how full the agendas are.
Okay, perfect. And then, so with that, because on a lot of these, as you said earlier, it's discussion and then there's action. So I think some of these honestly should be more along the lines of, yes, it's a discussion, but it's a discussion that somebody comes up here and addresses you guys and says something. And then, you know, maybe a parent has a question about that. Like I had to ask this nice lady right here about a couple things because when she was up here, I couldn't come up and just ask her, you know, and it wasn't to be mean or anything like that. I just had questions and she might not be here next time. Right. And so I can't
Mr.
ask her.
President, again, I'm sorry to interrupt, but this is just whether or not to cancel the meeting.
Yeah, so we deviated off the agenda topic and we get in trouble for doing that.
I don't understand why we get in trouble for doing it.
We do, you don't. It's an open meeting law requirement that the state imposes on us.
Okay.
I can talk to you about any of this stuff like after a meeting or something. I'm more than happy to.
Perfect. And so is there a paper that has your guys' like contact information? Where
So do you have a few minutes to stick around
I
after the
do.
meeting? Okay. Let's
Perfect.
talk.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Renee, I'm sorry, any remote public comment on this item?
No, Mr. Cassiopo, thank you.
Okay, back to the board. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, thank you. Moving on to approval of the consent agenda. This is for possible action.
Mr. President, I'll move that we accept the consent agenda as submitted.
Motion by Mike, second by Laurel. Any board discussion on this? Seeing none, any public comment, any in-person public comment on this? Seeing none, any remote public comment?
No, Mr. Cassiopo.
Thank you, board. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Seeing none, motion carries. Item 14, informational items. This is for discussion only. I just refer the board and the public to item 14, A and B. One thing I'd like to make mention as part of additional items regarding the superintendent hiring. I've been coordinating with NASB, who, as everybody knows, is excuse me? No, this is part of 14. Yeah, been talking with Deb, and they are going to be submitting, starting tomorrow, there's going to be a survey available online for the community. And they've prepared questions for the community just to get some initial input on what folks maybe are looking for in terms of a superintendent. We did not prepare it. It came straight from NASB. And that's going to, I believe Dan Davis, it either has gone out already or it's going to go out. It'll be a notice that this is happening. And then tomorrow, I'm not sure exactly what time, but it will be posted. There'll be a link for English and Spanish speakers. And it will be The survey is intended to be available from tomorrow, which is the 27th of October, and it will end November 5th. And then at that time, NASB will collect that raw data, summarize it up for us, and then I'll be getting with everybody about an upcoming special board meeting that we will be having to discuss that and kind of but continue the process of a superintendent. NASB will be at the special board meeting. Actually, I have that date. It's November 15th. We'll send information about it as far as the time and everything. And we asked that all the board members attend because at that meeting, I believe Deb Oliver and maybe her staff will be here and they're going to walk us through the survey, walk us through some things to think about, and we're going to start putting the process together to move forward with advertising for the superintendent position. So anyway, with that, that's wanted to make sure that I got that out to the board and to the public under this additional items. Item 15 is request for future agenda topics. Do we have any?
Not necessarily a topic, maybe just a practice. I think there's some confusion with public comment, and we have a lot of people who aren't used to these meetings and what the purpose of public comment is. And I think it would be helpful if you read the statement we have in the agenda so that that's very clear to the people in the public, so they're not just trying to figure out.
No, fair enough. Yeah, I know it's been posted, or, per the requirement to post in advance, but I'm happy to reread it. Okay, any other requests for future agenda topics? Seeing none, item 16, we're adjourned. Thank you, everybody.